I just wish everybody welcome and thank you for taking the time to participate in our webinar this morning. Um, First of all, I would like to do the quick introduction about what Wheel and Anchor is all about for those of you who are new to us and how this community came together. And I emphasize community because I've been doing travel, bringing Canadians on trips for the better part of 30 years. And my experience was always that whenever you have people who have a like-minded view of travel and how to experience the world, the sights, the sounds, the tastes, the smells, all about it, when you have a group of people that are like-minded, you just have a better time. We have a lot more fun. And so the idea here is that we get to know each other and yeah, we travel in smaller to medium-sized groups and we have a lot of fun. So that's our mission, is bringing travelers together. And my personal mission for each and every one of our members is about being well-traveled and well-connected. And what does that mean? Well, you know, for a lot of people, well-traveled is like having a long bucket list and saying, check, 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 I've been here, here, and here. But of course, there's a lot more to travel than just, you know, having passed through a country. And I can think, you know, in my earlier days of travel, when we were sort of focusing on these bus tours through Europe, and you look at the itinerary and it's like, it's Tuesday, it must be Rome. And this is not the way that I like to relate to travel, and most of our members think the same way. It's about having the time to stop, to look around, to sit in a cafe, to, you know, sip a glass of local beer if we're in Germany, or wine, or whatever it may be, and just get a real flavor for what life is like in these places. And in the meantime, you're meeting people along the way, not just your other fellow travelers who have the same aspiration, but most importantly, particularly on a program like this, like on our 5x5s or our liveaways, you actually get to meet local people and you develop a bit of a connection, and you have an insight about what life is like in that particular country, that part of the world. And that's my goal for all of our members at Wheel and Anchor. Joining me on our webinar today, as usual, I'm Gordon, the founder of Wheel and Anchor. I think I know a lot of you, or hopefully you know me by now. I'm joined by my colleagues, Paula Tsarnik, who is our senior trip specialist and the person you're most likely to speak to if you call our office, as well as Joel Curry, who is my co-founder and does all of our technical support for these webinars. And frankly, does a lot of the work in helping me to pull this together. Our plan today, as usual, it's all about taking you guys being interested in traveling through this part of Central Europe, and me being your guide, as it were, not just virtually on our webinar today, but also live and in person. I will be hosting this trip as we travel through this wonderful countryside, and I am going to be giving you a little bit of a play-by-play about what all we can expect on this trip. First of all, what is a 5x5? It's a new concept. Again, we just introduced the idea less than a year ago at the request of members who, by and large, said, we'd like to spend more time. So many tours are hectic and you're being sort of pushed from place to place to place, and you don't really have the time to get to know the place. And so this is one of our answers to that common complaint from travelers. And so the concept here is that it's organized in 5-night stays, because in all my experience of travel, if you stay in a place for 5 nights, that gives you 4 full days to really get a feel for it. And so that is the logic behind 5 nights, because of course you have an arrival day and a departure day. And with a lot of trips, you know, you end up spending 1 or 2 nights in a place, and, you know, you're just worried about checking in and getting settled down, and, you know, not even time to unpack your suitcase. And next thing you know, it's all about departure again. Doesn't give you much time to also appreciate the hotel, which is an important part of the trips, at least for the ones that we choose. Another key hallmark of our 5x5s is the fact that we have a combination of organized and leisure time. So roughly half of the trip, so 2 out of 4 days, and it could be half days or it could be a full day, is organized. In other words, we pick out some of the best things to see in that town or city, and we put that into the program, but then we give you full half the time. So 2 full days where you can go out and explore on your own. Now, does that mean we're just sort of sending you out the door? No, I'm there, our local guides are there, and we can help you to curate your experience, whether you just want to sit in a coffee shop and literally soak in the atmosphere of the place, or if you want to be more adventurous. This is designed to allow you to be able to do what you want to do with some assistance from us. Another key point about our 5x5s is that you can more or less start and end where you want. So although the program is 5 segments of 5 nights, or in this case, it's actually 6 segments, because I just simply had to add one more on. But you don't have to do all 6. You can do as few as 2, or you can do 3, 4, 5, or 6. So in other words, on this trip, where you can start in Munich, Heidelberg, Aachen, Ghent, Utrecht, and then Bremen is our last stop. So you can go for as many segments as you wish, depending on the time or the budget that you have. And the 4th hallmark, again, living like a local. And this is an important, really important point to me as well, is that because this trip, this goes into our last point, which is about smaller groups. So we're using local transportation, we're using local trains and coaches, we're traveling like local people do, which is, again, I think an important point. When a lot of trips in Europe, you get on a bus and you're with the same people, so you're in a little bit of an sort of an insulated environment. But this way, we're traveling around like, ordinary Germans and Belgians and Dutch. And we're staying in hotels that tend to be smaller. We pick more boutique hotels. We avoid the tour group hotels that so many of the other companies stay in, because these are the places that locals go when they go for a weekend visiting some of these towns and cities. So this makes it a very, very different experience than what you'll find on a lot of trips that you'll find out there. And as I say, the last point, smaller groups. Generally, we're sort of between 12 to 18 people, maybe a couple more, maybe a couple less, but that's the range that we're working with, which means we've got a lot more flexibility. So that's what a 5x5 is all about. Let me now get into this one, Germany and the Benelux, what this is all about. Looking at the map of the region as a whole, we're seeing a lot of different parts of Europe here. So we're starting off in Munich, in southern Germany, in Bavaria, which is very distinct from the rest of Germany. And certainly if you've been to Germany before, if you know German people, a lot of them in the north part of Germany in cities like Berlin and Hamburg will say, everything south of Frankfurt is Bavaria. And so it's quite distinct, the culture, the traditions that you find in southern Germany, like where we were at the beginning of the trip in Munich and Heidelberg, versus, for example, at the end when we stay in Bremen and visit cities like Hamburg and Bremerhaven. We've got the Benelux countries. And so if you hadn't heard that term before, Benelux means Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg. So we're going to get a taste of each of those countries. And although there's a lot of similarities between Belgium and Netherlands, of course, in the northern part of Belgium, they also speak Flemish, which is essentially Dutch. But they too, it's like Canada and the US, right? Belgium is Dutch and French, and the Netherlands speaks Dutch, but they're very distinct and they're very proud of that distinction. And so this trip gives us a chance to understand a little bit more why that is. So looking at the specific map again, the beginning point is Munich, although as I say, you can join us at any of these cities along the way. And from Munich, after the first days, we'll travel by train. Another interesting thing to do, and I'll tell you about that when we get there, up to Heidelberg, which is a university town in the sort of southwestern part of Germany. We'll then go up through Belgium and Luxembourg, stopping in Luxembourg City to visit Aachen, then by coach over to Ghent, which again, is probably one of those cities you're not too familiar with, then Utrecht and Bremen. So let me give you a quick overview, because you may not have heard of a lot of these cities, and I've kind of done that on purpose. First of all, because our members like to go a bit more off the beaten track. And so while we are off the beaten track in these cities that you may not have heard of, we're actually quite close and adjacent to the big cities of Europe that you will have heard of. And the reason I find that important is if you look, for example, at a town like Aachen, that again, you may not have heard of Aachen before. It's just about an hour away from Cologne, which of course is a large German city. And the big cities, like everywhere else in the world, have become very cosmopolitan, right? You go there and you find people from all over the world, right? Business people have moved there. They speak all manner of languages. And so there is a certain homogeneousness, is that a word? To the larger cities in Europe, whereas the smaller cities, the secondary cities, retain much more of that local flair and tradition. So we stay there, we soak that in, but at the same time, with the opportunity to go and visit the adjacent region, the adjacent and adjacent cities, and it's a more cozier way to do it. So let's get into the day-by-day itinerary. The format here is a little bit different if you've joined us on previous webinars, so just bear with me. This is a new way of presenting it, and so we're just all getting used to it. So if I make any mistakes along the way, but I pretty much know every town on this itinerary like I was born there almost. So as I say, we're starting off in Munich, and one of the benefits to starting in Munich, of course, is that we have nonstop flights from Toronto and direct flights from other cities in Canada. It's an easy place to get to, and it's a comfortable town. Munich is simply, it's a big city. It's one of the largest cities in Germany, but it's a comfortable city. And what would you already know about Munich? Well, of course, Munich is home of the infamous Oktoberfest that's held every year, actually in end of September and the beginning of October, one of the largest festivals in Europe. And if you haven't been to Oktoberfest, we're of course going in August, so we'll be a bit early for that, but you still get a sense of this very distinct Bavarian culture. You'll see people walking around in lederhosen, the leather pants, and Munich, as I say, is there we go. Munich is truly, it's the epitome of what Bavaria sort of represents with its beer gardens. Munich, of course, is the headquarters of BMW, and for car enthusiasts, they have the most incredible car museum. They actually have this tower full of BMW cars that's all in glass. It's the most bizarre thing. Munich, of course, sits in the shadow of the Alps, which are to the south. And as we spend a couple of days in Munich, we will venture a little bit towards this region. And of course, you've got 2 days. If you haven't been in the southern part of Germany or Bavaria, you can venture out and check that out. So when we arrive in Munich the first day, we'll probably be a little bit jet lagged, but nonetheless, we are, as in all the cities, staying very close to the center of town, close to the main railway station, which means an easy transfer in from the airport downtown. We meet you there, and we'll go out and walk around on an orientation tour like we'll do in every city. And Munich, the center of all of these towns, means we can walk just about everywhere we need to go. That's the benefit, again, of spending time in the city center in these places, is because you can do lots of things on your own. You don't need to go too far afield on your free days, but of course you have the option to do that. So Munich, the interesting thing about Munich is that after the first time they had the Olympics here, they turned all of the streets in the inner city into pedestrian streets, and they've kept them that way ever since. And so that makes it particularly friendly to walk around because there's no cars in the inner city. And if you can walk from our hotel to the famous Rathaus, that's the city hall that you see in the picture, where they have the Glockenspiel going off multiple times a day, and it's a lovely thing to watch. Munich, full of beer gardens. In fact, on our welcome dinner, we'll go to the Augustinergarten, which is one of the most famous beer gardens in Germany. Again, not far walk from the hotel, just on the other side of the railway station, and we'll go out and drink beer. And the German beer ladies, I won't describe them any more than that. They come along carrying 6 massive liter mugs of beer at a time, and they plunk it down on the table. And it's at that moment you'll realize you are smack dab in the middle of Bavaria in Munich. On our first full day outing, we'll head up to Nuremberg. So we'll hop on the fantastic high-speed rail system in Germany, the so-called ICE train, the Intercity Express. And in about an hour and a half, we will be in the second largest city of of Bavaria. One that is often not visited, except for those who may have participated in a Danube River cruise, for instance, between Prague and Budapest. They often embark in Nuremberg, but they seldom leave enough time to actually explore this town, which is why I wanted to include it in the program, because Nuremberg has a fascinating history as the place where, of course, the famous rallies were during the Hitler era. And so you can feel the sense of what what was going on during that really troubled period in world history by visiting Nuremberg and all of the quaint downtown that was completely restored. Of course, the city was largely bombed during the Second World War. We'll visit the Nazi rally grounds, as well as where they held the famous Nuremberg trials, where they went and convicted all of these war criminals from that period in time. So Nuremberg, a city very much worth spending the day. Just to give you some context about how these trips work. So we'll typically head out in the morning by high-speed train, the train station a short walk from our hotel. We'll spend a half a day with our local guide who will give us some great insight into the city, and then you'll be on your own. So we'll walk around, we'll set a time, we'll go back together as a group back to Munich, or you might say, I want to hang out for a few hours longer. There might be something specific you want to see, and then you can take a train later because they go every 30 minutes between Munich and Nuremberg. So it gives you the flexibility to kind of go as you wish. And of course, I'm there along the way to hold your hand, as it were, and make sure you find your way around. Another day trip that we will do that I've included in the program is to this beautiful lake south of Munich called the Chiemsee, which is sort of affectionately known as the Bavarian Sea. And why are we going there? Because they have this spectacular castle there. It's not this one, actually. It's called the Herrenchiemsee, which was built by the same guy that built the Neuschwanstein Castle. I'm going to show you that in a second. And so I decided to put this one in because everybody heads to the Cinderella Castle. In fact, it's a bit of a tourist mecca. And you line up with buses and buses of people, and it's certainly a wonderful place to visit. It's particularly nice from the outside, but here, this castle that we see, which was built by the same architect, is really a testament to the architecture to that time in history, and usually overlooked in favor of the more glamorous, if you will, Neuschwanstein Castle. So we'll have a wonderful day visiting Chiemsee and that castle. Again, 2 full days to visit Nymphenburg, which is just outside of Munich, very accessible. In each city, just as with our other 5x5 programs, we give you a city card that enables you to visit attractions, to use the transit system. It's Germany. People generally speak good English. And it's easy to find your way around. And of course, as I say, we're there to always sort of guide you in the right direction. For those that are, again, interested in the significance of history in this region, Dachau is a popular place to visit. It's a very somber place, as you can imagine, where they have the Holocaust Memorial, and it's only about an hour and a half outside of Munich. Again, very easy to reach. And if you're determined to go to this beautiful castle, and as you can see by the photo, it truly is beautiful, we can arrange as well that you can do a side trip down to Neuschwanstein, either under your own steam, taking the local and very efficient German train system, or by joining a tour. You might also head up to Regensburg, which is a lovely, lovely city. They call it Italy's most northern city, because of the sort of Italian style, the Romanesque architecture that you'll find there on the Danube River. And so one of the many things you can do, as I said, you could also visit the Olympic City, the BMW Museum, or you can just relax and enjoy the downtown part of Munich. After we finished our 5 nights in Munich, we're going to hop on once again on the German Intercity Express. That's like a white bullet train, if you will, in Germany. And in just under 3 hours, we will be on our way to Heidelberg. So from Bavaria, we head to Baden-Württemberg. So this is the southwestern province, state of Germany, which is where Heidelberg is located. And Heidelberg is in the northernmost city in this province, actually, and it's perhaps scenery-wise, one of the most picturesque stops on the trip. It's surrounded by forested mountains, and this area is known for having the most ruins from these magnificent castles that were built from the 15th through the 18th centuries. And because Heidelberg was one of the cities that largely escaped bombing in the Second World War, a lot of these old ruins have been, and old castles have been quite well preserved. So we will spend, again, 4 days, of course, in Heidelberg. The first full day we'll be visiting, we'll do an orientation tour, of course, when we arrive in Heidelberg, and get a sense of the things that you might do on your free days. And then we're going to head south. And what this province is most well known for from a scenery perspective is the Black Forest, and the town of Baden-Baden, which is perhaps Germany's most famous spa town. And so we'll drive through the wonderful rolling countryside. And, you know, sometimes you'll think you're not even in Germany, because we all think about it in terms of, you know, cities and towns, but they have a tremendous wilderness in this Black Forest area. And we'll visit the Mummelsee, and we'll, of course, get a chance to taste that delicious Black Forest cake, which is part of what makes the region, or its most famous export, if you will. We'll do as well the German wine route. This part of the Danube and the Rhine and the Mosel rivers that flow through this region is where you find some of Germany's most celebrated wines. And one thing I must say, because a lot of people, when they think about German wines, they think about Black Tower. Remember that famous black bottle that we and still see in the stores back home. They have evolved to become much more palatable, less sweet, very dry, and really excellent. So we'll spend some time exploring the wine region of Germany, which is in the area right around Heidelberg. 2 full free days that you can spend visiting some of the castles, as I said, that are in the region. Heidelberg Castle being the most famous of them, or walking down the Philosopher's Walk. If we have more car enthusiasts, you went to see BMW in Munich. In about an hour train ride, you can be in Stuttgart, which is, of course, the home of Mercedes-Benz. And I've taken the tour of that car factory. Again, not something for everybody, but it really, really is fascinating to be able to go out and see some of these things that you wouldn't normally find on an ordinary tour. So that will be, here's the Mummelsee again that I was talking about in the Black Forest. And again, a very picturesque region, and we will definitely stop and try some of this delicious cake, probably more than one. And the Schwetzingen Castle as well is one of the many well-preserved, in fact, beautifully restored castles that you find in the area around Heidelberg. As we head out of Heidelberg, we're going to go overland through Belgium. So we're going to cross out of Germany through Belgium into the tiny little enclave of Luxembourg. And Luxembourg, of course, is one of the smallest countries in Europe. In fact, it's about half the size of Prince Edward Island, just to give it some context. And Luxembourg is perhaps best known for, this is where the wealthy, one of the places in Europe where the wealthy sort of park all their money. You take up residency in Luxembourg, the taxes are a lot lower, and that is perhaps its most important function in Europe. And so we'll stop in Luxembourg as we make the journey from Heidelberg up to Aachen, and then back through the Wallonia, the southern part of Belgium, on our way to Aachen. Now, Aachen is a town I first visited back in the late 1980s, and I was completely taken with it. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to come back. Aachen sits in a very interesting location. It's the westernmost city in Germany, and it sits in a little corner adjacent to the borders to both Belgium and the Netherlands. And the two provinces of Belgium and the Netherlands both actually are called Limburg. And so, you know, Limburger cheese from the old Bugs Bunny cartoons might come to mind. And that actually is a thing there. We can actually try it. And so from Aachen, we can visit some parts of Germany and Belgium that, again, a lot of people tend to overlook, but are certainly not worth, they certainly shouldn't be overlooked. So when we arrive in Aachen, which will be later in the afternoon, we'll have time for a short tour around. This will be one of the smallest towns on our trip, and a very walkable city, like all of them. So the rest of the day we'll have at leisure. In the morning, we'll get a full tour of Aachen and see particularly the cathedral in the middle of town, which is its most celebrated landmark. But maybe more importantly, we're going to go on a little culinary tour and try out the so-called Aachener Printen, these gingerbread delicacies that sometimes come baked in chocolate, like you can see here, or they come just out on a massive sheet. Really, really delicious. And one of the things that I like most about Aachen is their gingerbread. From Aachen, we are in a short period of time in the big city of Cologne. Cologne is the biggest town in the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia. This is the industrial part of Germany. But Cologne is known as a very warm and friendly city. In fact, the Cologners have what they call the Kölsche Grundgesetz, the basic law. And the idea behind it is that you are, well, I won't tell you exactly what all of the rules mean, but essentially it's a code for good behavior that they very much stand by and they're very much proud of. So you'll find that the people in Cologne are very friendly, very open-minded. They'll come up and talk to you on the street. They're a bit different than some of the Germans you'll find in other parts of Germany, which is why it's nice to sort of spend a day here. We can easily go back and forth by train, so we spend part of the time with our guide, part of the time on our own, exploring this exciting city. The other city that is really close to Aachen, in the other direction, is in the very southernmost part of the Netherlands, and it's the city of Maastricht. And I remember I actually first visited Maastricht not that too long ago. A good friend of mine lives there. And Maastricht, of course, is where the Treaty of Maastricht, which was basically the birth of the European Union. But besides all of that sort of political history, it is just a super charming Dutch town. And so when people think of the Netherlands, we most often think of Amsterdam. That's where everybody goes, and we'll stop there as well. But when you're in Maastricht, you really get a sense, it's a very different flavor of the Netherlands than you'll find in the northern part, because it's so strongly influenced by its neighbors, Germany and Belgium. It's sort of stuck in this little tiny corner of the Netherlands. Maastricht is perhaps best known as the birthplace of André Rieu. Many of you will know him, this famous musician who is constantly touring around the world. And he comes home every year. If we're lucky, maybe he might even be in Maastricht when we are there. A short drive in any event from Aachen. The other days that we spend there, there's some fascinating things to do. I think one thing that one should perhaps give a try is visit one of the famous spas in Germany. And, you know, they have a different relationship to these massive indoor swimming complexes because people tend to flock there often on the weekends. And it's a family affair. We don't really do that as much at home in Canada, but it's part of the culture. I think one thing I always caution Canadians about, of course, is Germans love their nudity. So you have usually a whole section of the spa where everybody is in their birthday suit, as it were. So that requires a little bit of extra gumption from Canadians. But again, if you're up for the challenge, it's an interesting experience. You can also head over to Dusseldorf, which for an industrial city has some amazing architecture, a beautiful, beautiful Altstadt, so an old town in the middle. And once again, it's super easily accessible from Aachen. You might just hang around and visit the headquarters of Lindt. We've all heard of the famous chocolate. This is where the headquarters is, and they have a factory outlet there, so you can imbibe yourself in chocolate for the whole day if you're so inclined. All in all, we'll have a lovely time in Aachen. I just want to say at this point as well, I didn't mention it before, but again, you can start in any of these cities and you think, well, how the heck would I get to Aachen? It's actually a relatively easy train ride from Frankfurt, which of course is one of the main airport hubs in all of Europe. And they have a train station right in the airport. So if you say, well, you know, I might want to go to Munich and Heidelberg, I want to focus on the Benelux area and start, for example, in Aachen, we would provide you with train tickets to get from Frankfurt Airport to Aachen, detailed instructions on how to do that. And it's super efficient. You almost can't get lost. And the wonderful thing is that in Europe, people are generally always super happy to help travelers who look like they might be lost. And so, again, that's one of the big benefits of this trip is that we make it easy for you to start wherever you want. We will travel by coach just because it's a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficient from Aachen through the Limburg into the so-called Flanders region of Belgium and end up in the city of Ghent. This is, as far as the cities on on this tour, arguably my favorite one. I love them all, but Ghent is so picturesque. This picture, I think, really captures it all because it's full of these grand squares. And Ghent, has a bit of a connection to Canada because, of course, the Treaty of Ghent, which was signed between the UK and the US, ended the War of 1812, of which, of course, we were somewhat involved at that time, since it concerned us. So there's a little bit of that connection. Ghent is a big university town, but most of all, it's a festival town. And every year in Ghent, they have this massive festival. It goes on for 10 days, all day, all night. I actually went there to that festival once. I think we're just going to miss it by a week or so, depending on when the dates are for next year. But nevertheless, you will get a flavor for how Belgians live in this part of the country. And a lot of people skip out on Ghent because they go to, Brussels and Bruges, and again, the more famous places. But I think that this is a city that really shouldn't be overlooked. So as per usual, we'll arrive into town. We always give you a bit of an orientation tour. We have a lovely hotel, which is an old post office that we're staying in right in the middle of town, as with all the cities. And you will, when you arrive in Ghent, you'll simply want to stay forever. That's always the flavor that I get of it. Is such a friendly, livable city. On our first, as I say, on our first day, we'll spend some time touring around, getting the historical perspective on it. You can see some of the buildings here, absolutely magical. And we'll visit the Gravenstein, which is this is the Flanders, so-called Flanders region of Belgium. The counts built these magnificent castles like Gravenstein. And then, of course, we have to hit Bruges. Bruges on the English Channel is sometimes known as the Venice of the North. I know a lot of cities in Europe call themselves the Venice of the North, but the medieval buildings, this city has some of the best preserved medieval buildings that you'll find anywhere in Europe. So as far as picturesque cities go, Bruges is probably the most picturesque one on the trip. Some of you may have stopped here once before because it is often included in trips around, this part of Belgium. But if you haven't, again, we get to spend a whole day here. And because the train system in Belgium, just like in Germany and the Netherlands, is very efficient, you can spend as much time as you like. We can't visit Belgium without visiting Brussels. And when you go there, just like with other European capitals, you'll get a sense of how cosmopolitan Brussels has become. Because, of course, it is the headquarters of the European Union. It's effectively the capital of Europe. You see people from literally all over the world in the streets. But Brussels itself has a beautiful old town, the Grand Place, with wonderful cafe, sidewalk eateries. We'll visit a lot of Brussels by coach because it's actually quite a sprawling city in the meantime. We'll see the European Parliament. We'll see this juxtaposition between, all the investment that's come in as a result of the EU, as combined as well with sort of the old world charm. What to do on free days in Ghent? Well, I'll tell you, you probably won't even want to leave town. If you do, you can take a short train trip to go to Antwerp, for example, which is, of course, the home of diamond production in Europe. You might just take a little boat trip, or you can even go kayaking around in the canals of Ghent, which gives you a very sort of quiet perspective of the city. Ghent is also known for Belgian chocolate. Those famous Belgian truffles are made here, so you can gorge yourself on those ones as well, or visit some of the other food markets, cafes. Ghent, as I say, is just such a a yummy city to spend some time in. Yeah, the Belgian chocolate needs no introduction. In Ghent, they also have these things called kubeldoms. They also call them noses, which are licorice, soft licorice type. You know, the Belgians are good with anything sweet. And there's any number of museums as well. In particular, the Fine Arts Museum is one that I can highly recommend, and is one of the finest ones that one of the finest fine arts museums that you'll find anywhere in Belgium. So that's Ghent, a wonderful city to stay. We'll travel here once again overland by coach, about 2.5 liters, and we'll be in Utrecht, yet another town you might not have heard of, and undoubtedly my favorite town in Holland. In fact, some people call it the most charming canal town in all of Europe, beating out even Amsterdam and Venice and other cities that are known for canals. And the reason being is because Utrecht, for those of you who've been to Amsterdam, or maybe you haven't been there, if you close your eyes, you think you're in Amsterdam because of all of the Art Deco buildings lining the canals, the canal houses. They're not all straight. But it's a much more compact city. And of course, here we'll be staying again in the center of town, not too far from the main railway station. And you get the sense of what life is like here. All these open air restaurants lining the canals. Utrecht is a university town, which means in August it's actually a bit quieter because the students are all on holiday. But at the same time, it does get its fair share of visitors, but nothing anything like Amsterdam. While we're here, we remember that the Netherlands is also a very small country. I mean, Netherlands is about half the size of Nova Scotia. So you can get from one end to the other by train in a couple of hours. And that's the reason I picked Utrecht, because it's kind of at the hub of the Dutch rail network. So while spending time in Utrecht, we can also easily visit the other important cities of the Netherlands. While we're here, undoubtedly we'll visit the Dome Tower. Maybe if you don't have a fear of heights, we can walk all the way up to the top, where you have an incredible view of the very flat Dutch countryside. Of course, remember that much of the Netherlands is actually below sea level and is protected by some dikes that we will see as we travel around the countryside. From Utrecht to Amsterdam is about a 50-minute direct train ride. So once again, we'll hop over in the morning. We'll get a tour of some of the more important parts of Amsterdam. You can walk around Amsterdam for days and days, of course, but most of it is all inside the so-called Singel, which is one of the main canals that surrounds the old town of Amsterdam. And for me, there are some really incredible sights to see there. The Anne Frank Museum, the Rijksmuseum are all on many travelers' lists. But for me, Amsterdam is a city to just simply watch carefully. People driving by on bicycles, the trams. It's probably one of the more dangerous pedestrian walking cities, because you've got a tram, you've got bicycles, you've got a road. And so, as I always say to people when I'm walking around in Amsterdam, just whatever you do, look both ways before you take a step, because there's public transit coming from you in all directions. But as I say, because there's a direct train connection, we'll be able to explore with our guide and then have time to walk around Amsterdam, knowing that we can take a train anytime. They go about every 30 minutes, or I think every 15 minutes from Amsterdam main station back to Utrecht. Another city that's worth visiting in the Netherlands, of course, The Hague, which is known as the International City of Peace and Justice because of the International Court of Justice is located here. And The Hague, again, is even more so than Amsterdam, has an incredible array of both historic buildings, but also modern buildings. And again, this was a great picture that Joel found that really gives you that sense of old and new. So it's a fascinating city to visit. I haven't been there in many, many years. I'm looking forward to going back and revisiting what it's like. 2 full days in Utrecht, from where there's a lot of different things you can do, because as I say, you can practically travel to every corner of the Netherlands within a day. And we're giving you this 2-day Holland card, which means you can travel pretty much anywhere, if I'm not mistaken, across the whole country to be able to explore a little bit more of the Netherlands. You might visit Rotterdam, which is most famous as one of Europe's biggest port cities. You could also as I said before, you could also stick around in Utrecht and once again kayak through the canals. It's really a neat feeling to be in a big, not as big as Amsterdam, but it's still a good sized city, and to be peacefully kayaking around through the canals. It's a neat thing to do. You might also want to go to Sonnenborg, which is one of the most important celestial observatories. They have a fantastic interactive museum there. There's so many things to do in Utrecht, or you might go back to Amsterdam for the day. So I envisioned that because you're not far away, you might not get enough. You might say, oh, I didn't get a chance to stay to check out the Anne Frank Museum. So in any event, we're there to facilitate whatever it is that you might want to do on your free time. The last leg of our trip is perhaps the longest overland journey. We'll travel about 3.75 hours or so from Utrecht through the northern part of the Netherlands into northwestern Germany, Lower Saxony specifically, and we'll end up in Bremen. And once again, you may have heard of Bremen before, most likely because of the Bremertown Musicians. That was the cartoon from the Brothers Grimm with the rooster, the donkey, the dog, and the cat that were the 4 musicians that were trying to make their livelihoods. One of the most famous fairy tales, I think, that the Grimm brothers came up with. And their home, of course, was Bremen in Germany. So we'll have ample time to soak in Bremen, which is probably one of the most charming and friendly towns in northern Germany. This is the thing, a lot of people, again, don't spend time in northern Germany. I mean, there's often when you travel to Germany, people do visit Munich and Berlin are the famous cities, but sometimes Hamburg, but a place like Bremen is one where you really get a sense of northern German culture and tradition that you don't find on many itineraries. And that's why I wanted to include Bremen. You can see the classic design of the houses, of the buildings here on the so-called Market Square. And Bremen is an important port town. And so while it is a bit of an industrial city on the outskirts, it retains this super old world charm. Sometimes it looks a little bit like the Netherlands, but at the same time, it's very much Germany, like here in the Schnur district in the central part of the town. From Bremen to Hamburg is about 90 minutes by high-speed train, once again. And Hamburg is, I would say, my favorite city in Germany. It is so, so beautiful, full of lakes and rivers and canals. And they've taken this whole industrial quarter of Hamburg and turned it into the most incredible residential. It's like all lofts, like you see in the picture there. And Hamburg as well is worth spending, the better part of a day. On our other included day trip, we'll head to Bremerhaven, which is next to Rotterdam, perhaps the second biggest port city in Europe. So it's fascinating to get a bit of a sense of the port itself, but also the charm, as it were, of northern Germany. While we're in Bremen, we're approaching the end of the trip. So you might want to sort of take it a bit slow and just spend some time. They have this fascinating crypt here called the Bleikeller, which is literally translated as the lead cellar, where you'll find these effigies, if you will, of human remains. That might not be your thing, but otherwise for science enthusiasts, they've got this very cool drop tower, which is where they test in a vacuum chamber, a very tall building. They drop stuff down and see what happens to it. It's really kind of a cool thing. And of course, the home of Beck's is here in Bremen as well. One of the most well-known breweries in Germany, of course. If you haven't tried a Beck's before, then this will undoubtedly be the place to do it. And in August, the rhododendrons should be in full bloom, and Bremen has its share of amazing gardens and parks. And all in all, I think it's a charming place to round out our 5x5, or in this case 5x6 tour through Germany and the Benelux countries. So allow me to give you a little bit of some of the details. Of course, our brochure is released simultaneously with the launch of our program today, and that gives you all the details about how the program works. So just as with our other 5x5 program, we price this out in segments so you can choose any combination of cities that you want to. So you can do as few as 2 or as many as all 6. Obviously we have pretty good rates as well for those who are solo travelers. Generally, each program includes our accommodation 5 nights in each city, again at these centrally located boutique hotels, our transportation in between, which is either by train or in some cases by coach. If you arrive at one of the other cities, depending on where it is and relative to where our starting point is, it'll either be by train, if that's a convenient option, or otherwise we do it by private taxi transfer. We have breakfast every day. We have a welcome dinner, a farewell dinner in each city. And with our day tours, we usually have a lunch included. So the free days, we just have breakfast in the hotel. And that is great because it enables you to go out and explore some of the restaurant scene in these great cities and really enjoy the local flavors. And otherwise, we picked out some great restaurants to enjoy the included meals. And I'll be with the group for the whole time. And this is part of the fun, because those of you who have traveled with me before know that, you know, I love the spontaneity of this kind of travel, where it's like, oh, what's going on today? You know, there's a concert in the local cathedral, or you know, there's some event or festival that's happening that, you know, we might not have known about in advance. So that is part of the fun of traveling with some flexibility in the itinerary. As far as exclusions, of course, airfare, which we can quote you on. And although guided tour per se is not included on the leisure days, I'm always there to take whoever's willing and able to do some fun stuff. And other than that, of course, travel insurance, which is really important. Airfare, as I've mentioned on previous programs, we will be quoting as early as this fall, once some of the routes start to be reinstated after we get through this pandemic. And hopefully they're going to stay in roughly this range, where you should be able to fly in and out of any of the gateway cities from the major cities in Canada, in and around the range that you see there. So now is the time to get any of your questions answered about this program. I'd love to hear what you think about it, or what questions you have. I see a few have already trickled in. So Joel is going to give me a hand with that. Let's see here. Okay, all right, Joel, my Q&A button isn't working. Okay. Okay, so Joel, if you can pull any questions out, put them in the chat box. No, that's not working either. Okay, oh, here it is down here. I got it. Okay, great. So how does that gingerbread, the Aachen gingerbread, compared to the Lebkuchen? Well, that's interesting, because I didn't mention in Nuremberg, they're famous for their Lebkuchen, which is a more gingery, I think, form of gingerbread than the Printen in Aachen. It's hard to tell. If you put them side by side, I think you could definitely distinguish the two, but at the same time, they are they're similar but different. I think if you talk to the locals, they'll definitely tell you that they're a bit different. One of the questions that came in by email, will we be offering this again in 2023? Absolutely. So, you know, we put a great deal of effort into putting these kind of programs together, and based on our member surveys that we've done earlier this year, there was a lot of people that were interested in this style of travel. And so it's possible that we may alter some of the stops slightly, but generally speaking, I think this is a great way to explore this part of Europe. So almost certainly, we're going to be offering this program again in 2023. And I see a comment here from Fran that Regensburg has the best sausages in Germany. And the itinerary, another question that just came in, when the itinerary will be out. So we always record our webinar and put it, of course, on our YouTube channel, and we send it out to everybody, whether or not you were able to attend the webinar. You will get a copy of it, and together with that, you will get a copy of the actual printed itinerary that we're excited to release. And good, well, that appears to be all the questions today. So that was an easy one. I must have done my job. So of course, if you do have any questions at all about this program, drop me an email, talk to Paula, give her a call. We're here, we'd love to hear from you. We've been busy. It's certainly been a very busy few weeks as people are getting excited to travel again. And we'd love to have you along on this trip. Don't forget, in a couple of weeks' time, we have our Live Away program in Tuscany. I'm very excited to present that. This is the 4th Live Away in our series, where we'll be spending 2 weeks in Florence and 2 weeks in southeastern Tuscany in a lovely little village called Cortona. And we'll tell you all about that on July the 8th at 11 o'clock. Thank you again for joining us. It has been a delight and a pleasure, and I hope that you found our program interesting today. And I look forward to catching up with all of you again soon, and look forward to hearing from you and talking to you and hopefully meeting to you before too long. So have yourselves a wonderful day, and we'll catch you again on our next webinar.